Hello, movie lovers. Welcome home. My name is Amy Henserling, and you are listening to Watch This List. Today is a very special episode and kind of bittersweet, as it is my series finale of She Said, She Said. And since I began the series with Jetta, the Iron Cupcake, I am also ending the series with Jetta. And I think that both of us we went on a little bit of a journey here because Jetta had or I picked a movie first, right, Jetta? And then you picked a movie, and then neither of us really liked the movies that we chose. And so we
Mhm.
finally landed on what we decided today. But I can't remember.
Yeah.
Did I start it or you? I think I
Uh,
did. Or you
I
did.
think I did because I picked Dogfight,
That's right.
and you liked it but didn't love it, and then you
Yeah.
picked Midsommar. I hope I'm saying that right. And I had questions, concerns, issues. So
Didn't love it.
yeah, I mean, no, I didn't hate it for sure. Like it's not like it was outright tearing it apart, but it was more like I want it to be. I don't know. I just felt like I could have a more constructive conversation about other films. And
Yes.
today's will be very interesting. So, yeah, I
Well,
think this is
so
the right call.
what we did was I picked Poor Things because it's what gave me the idea to start She Said in the first place, because I walked out of the theater that day and I was like, I want to speak to women. I want to do a series about women in film and how women see themselves in film, female characters especially. And then, of course, Jetta, we had to do Barbie.
Hmm.
We had to pair it with Barbie.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting hearing us. I suggested that this might be a court case and we'll be arguing our sides, but honestly, kind of.
Okay, so obviously, well, I'm going to assume that most people have heard of these two. So it's not like we have
Hmm.
to explain plot stuff. Um, but I am interested in the difference between how you see yourself in Barbie and how you see yourself in Bella. So let's start out. I think we're going to start with Barb's, directed by Greta Gerwig. But I want you to tell me because you loved it, what
Hmm.
resonated with you and what really stuck out to you when you first saw it? Because you saw it a little bit later than most of us. A lot of us saw it like when it came out, and you were pretty delayed.
Right. For whatever reason, I didn't get to see it during the incredible Barbenheimer summer. I did see Oppenheimer when it came out because I knew that that was the IMAX experience I needed to have, but just didn't have time for Barbie, and I ended up not seeing it till right before the Oscars. I think it was like a week before.
That's right.
So, or less than a week actually. So
And
I
we were
wanted
together for that.
that is true, and we had the delight of seeing I'm Just Ken at the Oscars, watching
Yes.
together on the same couch. So that was special. Ryan Gosling's greatest moment as a performer.
In his life, yeah.
So yeah, I'm glad that I waited till then because I oftentimes wait until right before the Oscars to decide once and for all what my favorite movies of the year were. I'm just very, very lax when it comes to ranking things, and I like to take as much time as possible. And it felt like the right moment to see it. It felt like maybe there was so much hype and then so much criticism, and that whole summer there was just so much discourse. It was a little exhausting, and I think it was better to see it on my own and decide for myself. And I think as much as it would have been fun to see it with a crowd, I thought it was great on my own. And conversely, there are some movies where you need an audience. So we'll get into that more later with Poor Things because I think that benefits from having a theater. But Barbie is just delightful. It's delightful. And I like that both of these movies are about a woman's journey into the outside world and about finding herself. So perfect to pair them, really. I don't know to what
Yeah.
extent I see myself in Barbie. This may require more therapy, this may require more psychoanalysis, but I just like the idea of women venturing out onto their own and finding their voice and figuring out what makes them uniquely themselves. Um, with Barbie in particular, I like that it is not about romance. I like that it is not about defining herself through a relationship. It is specifically about figuring out her own individual identity. Because I think that too often films are about how do I define myself through another person's eyes? And really, it's about who is she in the world? And I think that's very relatable for me specifically, but I think for a lot of people too. So that resonates for sure.
So there wasn't a particular, maybe if it wasn't Barbie, was there any character there that you felt, or did you see this as more like a
Hmm.
light comedy as opposed to taking it that seriously?
I think it does both. I mean, I think that it is incredibly light and goofy and fun. I love as Greta Gerwig has described it, the Jacques Demy inspiration. I love that
Mm-hmm.
candy colored fun aspect to it, but I also think that, the much discussed America Ferrera monologue is genuinely powerful. I know a lot of people feel like it's heavy handed and corny, but it gets at certain core truths that I think a lot of women, not to generalize and say all, but many women think about and face. We question who we are. We question what our role is. We question, are we enough? Are we not enough? Are we falling short in some way? Have we succeeded in the way that other people want us to succeed? How do we even know if what they want is what we want? Those are things I have worried about and just like gone crazy over. And so that feels very, very, I don't know, just deeply powerful to me. So, as cheesy as it may be, and as obviously written as it may be, I think it works. And as long as it works, then that's good.
I don't I don't think it's cheesy at
It is a
all.
little cheesy. It
Well, I
is.
think my problem with it, honestly, if I mean, I don't want to say problem, but I guess the discomfort I have at that is that it seems very like, I mean, everybody has it hard, and so it feels very like I don't
Playing to
think
the
that,
back row.
yeah, like I don't think that women have a harder time in those areas that, like, a lot of those things could have been applied to men or to all of
Mm,
us, period. Like, and I don't
I
feel
think
like,
women do, but yes, go on.
yeah. See, well, this is where we differ, because I would have preferred that Barbie was more about, um
The man.
no, just like equality and us not taking advantage of their weaknesses. The whole arc
Mm.
of, like, the thing that gets them all back into Barbie world is by manipulating the men and playing them against their own weaknesses. I think is
Mm.
terrible, and it really bothers me. Like, that they're like, "Oh, just dress sexy and talk about the Godfather," and in a way, it's like, I guess that's funny, but to me, it's like, what are we saying here? That, like, the only way that we can get back on top is actually not by being ourselves, which is kind of the main message, but it's by taking advantage of the fact that men are attracted to women, straight men are, and just
Mm.
like pouncing on all of that and exploiting them. I just, a lot of it makes me very uncomfortable, honestly.
Interesting. Which is also valid, and I like that we are going to disagree about this. I think it's totally fine to mock the absolute absurdity of all of the ways that those male characters act, because I thought a lot about the fact that there's not a tremendous amount of difference between Ken in this movie, which is to say Ryan Gosling's Ken, and Duncan in Poor Things. They're both pretty
Hmm.
ridiculous. And if not for the fact that, Ken doesn't seem to have sex, I think that they both want to take advantage of their place in the world as much as possible. They want to have territory, they want to own property, they want to assert themselves, they want to be the driving force in whatever they do. Um and honestly,
Yeah.
I've known a lot of guys who do think that, like, if the women can just talk to them about the Godfather, then, like, they're cool. And so I think that the movie is picking apart a lot of true absurdities and making fun of them. And to me, it's entertaining. To me, it's funny. I don't take it as a harsh criticism because there is, like, reality in there. Like, I don't know. I think it's funny. So I think, to me, like, the fact that it's funny makes it palatable. But if you don't
I
find it
understand that.
funny, then
Yeah,
of
but
course then it's going to, ring differently.
if it were someone else besides Greta and Noah, I would say I would probably just write it off as silly, but I know that they're saying something there
Mm.
in the whole movie. I don't think that they're just, like, being nice. I
No.
think that they're giving a social critique, and especially against men.
But so
And,
this
like,
is, yes,
them just
sorry.
wanting to, like, I mean, part of the reason that Duncan and Ken are that way is because they're being completely rejected all the time. And like, when people are rejected
Is
all the
Duncan
time,
being
they
rejected by everyone? He's made a big deal about the fact that he's, like, I don't know, so wanted by so many women. I don't feel like he's been entirely rejected all of his life. I don't
no,
know
but
if you
he
can say that
has,
about
because he's
Ken.
not with any of them, and then he's rejected by Bella. I'm not excusing his behavior, but I am saying that
Well, I don't know what
to
his
make them
past is,
less
though.
human by just saying that they're jerks when there's a
Mm,
reason that they feel that way and that they're acting out of that, and then the women are actively contributing to not treating them like human beings with feelings,
I mean,
is
to be
in both.
fair, they are both cartoon characters. They are like the most cartoonish versions of men that you could find in movies. They are exaggerations, so there's not a
Yeah,
whole
but Jetta,
lot of humanity in them.
I'm gonna take it at face value anyway, because I
Okay.
know they're saying something like it.
Well,
Greta is not just like she's preaching. So I don't know. I'm not
mm,
watching this like we would watch Mamma Mia.
oh, I
This
was.
is this is different.
I
Yeah.
genuinely was because I think they are both larger than life, cotton candy, colorful extravaganzas. That's not to say that they can't have messages or emotion and heart. Mamma Mia has so much heart, but I do watch Barbie as a spectacle and as a comedy as much as I take to heart the messages in it. And I think there are a lot of really great messages in Barbie. But that also
But
brings
you
me
also
to
said that that there was reality in it. So now you're saying that it's silly, but you said
both things
just
can
a
be
few minutes
true.
ago.
I don't think that it
But
has
I
to be
know,
an
but
either
that's what I'm
or.
saying. I'm watching it as that, and you're
Mm.
saying, well, no, it's a spectacle, but those aren't the same things.
I think it does a lot of things all at the same time. It just doesn't do them necessarily all in the same scenes, but it covers a lot of territory. And I think that one of the most interesting things to me is the idea that I don't see Barbie as something made for one target audience, whereas I feel like all summer long last year I was reading reviews, specifically by men, which were all about how I'm not the target audience, I'm not the demographic. Take anything I write with a grain of salt because I don't know this experience, I don't know what I'm talking about, etc. Which
Mm-hmm.
is a little exhausting. And I also saw that with Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret. I saw that with other movies written and directed by women, presumably for women. And I don't think that Barbie was made assuming that only women would consume it. I don't think that it was made without Greta and Noah thinking men could watch this and take something away from it. So I feel like it's interesting that there's an assumption that I should feel more for it because I'm a woman. I don't think that I feel more for it because I'm a woman. I think I just respond to the entire entertainment package, if that makes sense.
You don't think that you don't think that she has a feminist message in Barbie?
I do, but I guess what I mean to say is I don't think that it was made only for women, and I don't think it was made only for women to feel something, and I find it interesting. Of course, you're a woman and you didn't like it, so of course that's not like a catch-all thing that only women can
Well,
appreciate
I
it.
don't
But
even think it has to, I don't think it has to do with like though, Jet. I
mm,
think it has to do with who what they're saying. I don't know that this is a matter of like liking or disliking. It's
mm,
just that they're very clearly I mean, they're
mm,
critiquing the patriarchy and they're doing it in a satirical way in order for it to be more palatable, like you said, but that doesn't mean that the message isn't extremely strong.
right. I also think that something I was thinking a lot about when I was watching this is I was thinking about arguments against the movie saying basically like there are ways to be a good feminist or a bad feminist and what it means if you like the movie. The thing about both Barbie and Poor Things is there are arguments for both sides about what it says about you if you like it or dislike it, like it
Yeah, that's
somehow.
not at all what I'm talking about.
No,
No.
I know. I was just thinking a lot about that in watching Barbie and in thinking about who it was made for. What was I made for? I was thinking about like what does it say about me? What kind of feminist am I? And I think the best answer to that is I don't really know if there is a way to categorize what kind of feminist I am. So I don't know if the way that Greta Gerwig is packaging feminism and explaining it necessarily needs to be the only way. I don't know if that made any sense. But there are a lot of different ideas just kind of like spit out into the movie. And I just kind of think it's all very interesting. And because I think in my life, everything is going on. I don't have a clear answer for a lot of things. I don't have one clear label for things. A lot of movies I like, I couldn't honestly call feminist, but what does that even mean? Because I can like whatever I like and have a lot of reasons for it. Maybe this is all to say I'm realizing now that I don't necessarily have one specific answer for why I love Barbie. I just feel it. And I
Yeah, and
hope that
maybe
that
it's
makes
just
sense.
it has more, I think, tell me if I'm wrong
Mm,
here. But my perception of your experience is the way that you sort of take in a lot of things, which is that the production design, the costumes, the silliness, the
True.
over the top character acting. There's a lot of elements in here that are frequent across all movies you like,
That's
not
true.
necessarily just because it's this.
Hmm.
And I think that if it didn't maybe have those things, that the message would be a little bit louder to you, perhaps, just like Midsummer was, because
Hmm.
Midsummer doesn't have the things that you like, and therefore the message was louder to you, and I think it hit you differently, maybe.
That's possible. I mean, I will also say one of the things I love most about Barbie is the segments with the Ruth Handler character that Rhea Perlman plays, that she's
Mm-hmm.
embodying the creator. Um, and I thought a lot about, of course, Godwin and Poor Things. I thought about like the people who made the women in these movies and what was their intention. And with Barbie, I mean, she's called stereotypical Barbie, but the whole point of the movie is that there is no stereotype. She's trying to figure out who she is, and she realizes there is no one thing. And that resonates with me. And there is an incredibly emotional component to those scenes because just the fact that, as Handler talks about in the movie, she doesn't look like Barbie. She created Barbie, but not in her own image, and that's also like Poor Things. You can create an image, but it doesn't necessarily have to represent who you are. So that's interesting because I was thinking about these movies as art. Um, but also, I was thinking about the fact that there's that line, and I know that other people have written about this, so I'm not taking anything new here. But there's that throwaway line about the double mastectomy, about the fact that Ruth Handler has gone through this, and this is just an aspect of who she is. This is just like a part of womanhood for her. And that really hit me hard because I was thinking about like what it is that defines women's bodies and how we define ourselves, and like what if you don't have this aspect of yourself that you associate with femininity. And I don't know, that just made me very emotional. So I feel like I have no clear answers, and I feel like this is going to be like a very confusing conversation
No.
because now I'm trying to piece together all the ways in which this movie just, it's entertaining, but it also makes me feel, and it also makes me, hurt when I think about my own insecurities, and it makes me think about ways in which I have felt lesser than. So it's not just that it's silly and fun, it also makes me think deeply about my facade versus who I am inside, and how sometimes those two things don't line up. And that is a struggle that, yes, universally a lot of people go through, but it is a very particular woman thing. So I've been thinking a lot
Well, and
about that.
that's kind of what I was trying to get at earlier when you were saying, "Oh no, it's just silly." I was like, "No, it's not." And
I
and
may
I
not have
know that
meant
you don't
that.
I know
I
that
don't
you
know.
don't feel that way
Mm,
because there is depth there. The thing is that I it's hard for me to discuss Barbie in a sort of measured way because my reaction to it is so strong in the other direction, and I feel like it's not just for me because about the acting or about any technical aspects, although I know those are for you, they mean a lot for you. To me,
mm.
it's the underlying messaging that's somewhat subliminal but really not. A lot of it is so unsubtle,
Oh no, it's
um
extremely
and in your
unsubtle.
face,
Yeah.
right? And so I am not like confused as to what she is saying, but I also just don't like
Mm,
the way in which it's done, to where if you sort of aren't on board, she is alienating based on the tone and style to such an extent that it's like all she's doing is preaching to people who either are not going to think about this critically, or they're just there to have fun. But it's not about
mm.
any sort of middle ground meeting. It's just like Ryan Murphy Glee level, we're way over here, and if you don't
Right.
agree with us, you're wrong.
Okay. I also don't mind that she's alienating people. I don't think that that's an issue because I think
Well,
I think that was one of the major criticisms was, feeling alienated, feeling like I can't agree with this, I can't be on board with it, I can't enjoy it. And I don't think that that has to be a negative. Like, I don't think that people can't watch it if they don't know the experience of womanhood, but I also think that it's not really my problem if it alienates anyone. It's not going to take away from what I think the effectiveness is for me. So I
Oh
guess I
no,
wasn't
that's
really
not what I'm
thinking.
advocating here.
No,
Yeah.
well, I was just thinking like, would I think less of the movie if when I was watching it, I was thinking about all the people I know who didn't like it and focusing more on those opinions, because sometimes those do affect how I view movies. Sometimes I go into a movie and I think so much about what people have said, either very positively or very negatively, and I let that color my reaction. I think that's like a normal human thing. A lot of people do
Well,
that.
that'd
So
probably be how you'd feel about Furiosa at this point. Furiosa.
that's
You'd
very
you'd
possibly
probably
true.
be,
Yeah.
not that you would like intentionally, but you've read so much about it at this point without seeing it that I think
Right.
it would be
Sometimes you
hard.
just can't help when you absorb those ideas
Yeah.
and you go into the experience. I'm sure you felt that way too sometimes. You
Oh
read
yeah.
you read certain things and then you go into it, and even if you're hoping against hope, you're like, no, I
Yeah.
feel it. So
Yeah.
it's complicated, I think, but I don't want to
So
say
if you
that I don't. It's not that I'm disregarding the messages. I love Barbie because I love the messages in it. I just feel like the fact that it doesn't work for other people doesn't change how I view it. And I can simultaneously love the spectacle and the color and the fun and silliness, but also feel like there's something extremely powerful about the journey she goes on and the fact that she is figuring out who she is and what she wants to do. Like, does she want a job? Does she want to actually do something in the outside world? Is there something for her beyond the dream house? The fact that she goes to the gynecologist at the end. These are like things that speak to me because that to me is all about like gaining knowledge and gaining a sense of self and questioning what it is that I think I'm supposed to do as far as relationships. I think it's very interesting that Ken does not have any romantic success in this movie, despite his trying. And despite the fact that he wants it, that's not enough for him. That's not good enough because she needs to want it. And because she doesn't want it, it doesn't happen. And I like that it's not pushed upon the movie, whereas I feel like, 10, 15 years ago, it might have been. So,
But
yeah,
don't you think it's also a
I
little bit insulting to people who feel like they can define themselves by who they love and
they
by what they want to
can.
do? I mean, it's also just like saying that it's not okay if you are defined by like homemaker type things as a woman because you need to be weird and you need to
No,
be
no.
independent and
Well,
like on your own.
America Ferrera says in that speech that it's okay that you can be a mother, it's okay that you can be a wife, that you can be a homemaker. I think she says all of those things. It's not like there's only one way to be a woman. They're
Right, but
all
then they're
different.
also saying that you can't be defined by a relationship very, very
It's
strongly.
not
So it's
saying you
like,
can't be. It's saying that in this specific instance, this Barbie is not going to be. That's not to say that other Barbies can't be defined that way. It's just for this specific character, because there is, I think, such an assumption that Barbie and Ken must be together, that there must be like the quote unquote happy ending that we associate with romance. And I like that that is not part of her journey because it doesn't have to be. That's not to say that it can't happen in the future, but I think
no, but
it's.
in my opinion, they are making a judgment on that. They are
mm,
literally trying to be subversive and say that this is by not having a happy ending where the prince and princess get together is like a radical notion of like being a female in today's society where you don't, there need to be female CEOs and there need to be this and men shouldn't be in charge because they're dumb and they like horses. And I mean, it's like the whole thing is
Horses, yeah.
just like, okay, I don't know. I feel like it's such an easy case to make,
Hmm.
that I don't find that it's like inspiring. I think that it's a little bit insulting if you don't feel that way, that they're not as inclusive as they are coming across as at the heart of it.
Well, for me, it's just I think that there is such a Hollywood precedent when you think of film history as far as the assumption we have of what a happy ending is. Like, yes, if you pull out of that into the real world, that is different. But if you think about like what we assume from a movie and what we assume a movie is supposed to end with, I personally feel like it's great that she doesn't end up with Ken because she doesn't need to end up with Ken. Like, it doesn't, like, just because he feels the desire doesn't mean that she has to reciprocate that. And
I know,
I
but his
personally find,
desire is just as valid, Jetta.
I'm not
That's what
saying,
I'm trying to say.
well, look, speaking as someone who has always experienced unreciprocated feelings, like, yes, of course, like, there's always the possibility that someone will not return that, but it doesn't have to end with the assumed Hollywood ending. And I was just glad that it didn't do that, because ultimately I was more interested in who Barbie was as herself. So, for me personally, I'm not saying that
I
I
hear
don't
you.
think that means that it can't ever happen ever in her whole life as Barbie, but for this narrative, for this story, I like that it doesn't end that way. Because she's gone out into the outside world, she can meet someone, it just doesn't have to be Ken.
Okay, so if you had to summarize, like, between the two characters, like between Barbie and Bella, in terms of how they acclimate themselves, do you personally see much of a difference?
Um,
I'm curious,
hmm.
putting you on
I
the spot.
mean, they are both thinking about the ways that they are viewed in terms of the male gaze. They are both constantly, I think, thinking about how men view them and filtering how they are going to approach life through, oh, this is how men work. Now I got to rethink this, and now I realize what I'm going to do. Because that is, for both of them, how the world has been structured. They are both working in worlds in which men have a lot of power, and they're realizing the ways in which they have to then work through that and figure things out and figure out, this is my place in the world, this is what I'm going to do, this is how I'm going to feel joy and pleasure and assert myself. So I don't know. I mean, let me come back to that. Let me think more about that when we
Okay,
discuss Poor Things.
okay. So Poor Things is next by Yorgos Lanthimos. It sounds like a Harry Potter spell.
No, it does.
I'm sure somebody's made that joke before. Um, with Emma Stone, Willem Dafoe, which you're about to see and maybe see Willem, right?
I
Or did you?
hope. Oh my
Yeah,
god. I don't know what if I'm like, if I'm going with anyone, if I'm doing, because I'm going to see Kinds of Kindness, for those who
right.
don't know, and that's going to be at the Museum of the Moving Image. I'm very, very excited to see Willem in person. So
That's
yes,
so exciting. I
yes,
wish I could too. And Ruffalo, who is not the same as our in the cut Ruffalo. Um,
and Rami
and
Youssef,
yeah.
who's
Oh,
wonderful.
right. True. Yes. So this is also very impressive technically. The music, the sound design, the production design, the costumes. I mean, they're it's kind of a punk rock aesthetic compared to the candy,
Hmm.
what you just called the candy coated colored for Barbie. Um, and then I guess in this one, I like how you pointed out the difference where in Barbie it's a female creator and in this one it's a male creator,
Mm-hmm.
which is an interesting juxtaposition. And then his name is literally, she literally refers to him as God. So that's a bit
And
on the nose, but
Godwin as a reference to
right.
Mary
But
Shelley,
it
of
is
course.
based on a book. So that wasn't just,
Hmm.
your ghost. But uh, as far as Bella is concerned, what do you like about her? What do you feel like resonates and is more like, okay, this is like the female experience specifically?
Hmm. So I had an interesting response to rewatching it,
Oh,
because it'll be complicated, I think, because I really appreciated seeing it in the theater. I think that's a movie where seeing it with a bunch of people is tremendously important. Sometimes when you see a movie with a lot of people and it's a dud, you're like, uh oh. But then when you see it with a lot of people and you get a sense that this is really working in the big screen context, that can change everything. That was incredible, for seeing with a lot of people, for getting a sense of the gasps and the shock. There was a man who was sitting next to me who squirmed at every sexual scene. That was
and there
interesting.
are a bunch.
It was like he didn't know anything about the movie going in. And something that I remembered as I was watching, so many little memories came flooding back. I remembered that in that first scene, when she discovers the appreciation of masturbation, it was like so silent a pin could have dropped.
Yeah.
Nobody in the theater made a sound, and I found that very interesting. Like, what does that really signify? That people are like in awe, that they're like,
Or like it's
so
sacred or too awkward.
yeah,
It's
like it
either
was a
that
very
it's like,
hmm.
go ahead.
Well, but it's something that's very interesting to me, because I always find the experience of watching anything sexual or sexuality related in movie theater is totally comfortable. So the idea that this would be like an uncomfortable, disturbing, even squirm inducing thing to people is just like sociologically fascinating to me, because I try to get in their head and wonder how are they receiving this. So I thought about that a lot when watching this, because I respond a lot to Bella's journey in figuring herself out, figuring out what brings her the most pleasure, what gives her sense of meaning, because a lot of this is about gaining knowledge, not only physically, but also, of course, all the books she reads, all the philosophy and politics, and everything she absorbs that makes her feel more a part of the world. I think that everyone has some version of doing that as they grow older. So I very much respond to that. I respond to feeling like with every passing year, I become more and more the person I want to be. I learn more. I absorb more ideas that I think are the way I want to live my life. And so I love that. But I do also have some criticisms if you want me to dig into them.
Go for it.
So I find it very interesting. For one thing, there's that criticism that a lot of people have talked about, which I don't know how much of a problem this really is. And I also don't know if it's discussed in the novel. So don't come after me if I haven't read the book. But
Ethan.
Yes. So the fact that Bella does not, from what we see on screen, have a period is very interesting. Because,
yeah, so she can't get pregnant.
Well, but the fact that she has other bodily functions and every other bodily fluid, it's
because I think it has to do with the surgery, because the baby's brain is literally put in her head and taken out, and I think it messes up her reproductive ability, basically.
I did think about that, because she is literally like a sexy baby. So,
well, but I mean, she begins with that, but then her brain grows as she. I don't think it's that she's like an infant forever, but
no.
I mean, it is taken out of her, and I think that if my take on this is that it affects her in such a way that she can't reproduce.
So that is possible, but I also think it's just possible from a production standpoint that it is easier not to show it. Because what I thought about was the idea.
Oh, I don't think so.
Well, because I thought about the fact that we see that scene of her peeing on the floor. And that was like a big laugh in the theater when I saw the movie, because, haha, isn't it hilarious? She can't control her body. And I thought, well, but if she were bleeding, that wouldn't be funny. That would be, oh no, that's painful. That's like cramps and like discomfort.
Yeah,
and
but
so that's a different
Jetta, nobody would want to see that. That's not really something that is, I mean, unless there's like a genuinely serious point. That's not something that anybody wants to see.
Because if you consider poor things as indicative of life cycles and what it means to become a woman, what it means to become a growing adult, I don't think, for me personally, I don't think that would have been an uncomfortable thing, because it's just like part of like the aspect of growing up. I don't see why, if we could all laugh at like peeing on the floor, like why couldn't we just like deal with like a scene of her like bleeding? Like,
because those are very different things, Jetta. And didn't she pee on the floor when she was a child? You're talking about at the beginning, right?
Yes, but like the blood could have come a little later. Like, she's accelerating at such a fast pace. Like, I don't really see why that would have been so absurd. Like,
but what would you feel that would signify? I mean, all it would say is like, oh, okay, like this is part of being.
It is part of like the experience of becoming a woman, going through puberty. Like, I find it interesting that she is defined in becoming an adult through sexuality, but that is a more palatable way to express it for us as the audience. And I think that by not showing the blood, it's like if you say it's like something no one would want to see, it's like, well, does the movie have to hold her hand in that way? Does it have to be?
No, but I'm just saying aesthetically, that's not like, that's typically just in horror movies. That's not.
But why is it only in horror movies? That's the thing that everyone goes through.
Because it is horrible.
But it's a thing everyone goes through. Why is that?
I know, but that.
Why is that somehow less acceptable just because it's blood?
I don't think it's that it's less acceptable. It's that it's that we are used to seeing it in a certain context, and to break that context would be difficult. I think it's just not worth the challenge. I don't think it's worth it in terms of what it would actually say, but that's just me, because I think of that as like the beginning of Carrie, and like I'm not associating that with something that I feel as a woman needs to be put out there, so that I feel like somebody is going through something. Like I just don't need that as proof.
Okay. I think, I mean, because I I appreciate when movies go to places that would be considered uncomfortable, that would be considered.
I know you do.
So,
And you like to make people
well,
uncomfortable. And I don't.
because I don't think that it should be seen as as discomfort or shame or like, ooh, I don't want to see that.
I understand where you're
Because
coming
I
from.
think that if we can accept sex and violence, we can accept every part of the human experience. And I think it's interesting that certain things are considered okay because we can handle it, and if it's taboo, it's just enough taboo. But there are things that are just too far. And
I
you
think
know,
you are also, though, Jet. I think you are also a person who is your like ick factor is very
but it's not ick.
you're
That's the thing. Like, it is a
no,
thing
but
everyone deals
you
with,
are
and so.
unusual in this way. Like you can see so much stuff that other people would consider gross and it not bother you. So
But it's
I'm
also
not
like,
trying to discredit you at all, but you are used to seeing a lot of things that are not normal, and I think
well,
that makes it so
you're
you're
digging a
way
deeper
more
hole.
comfortable.
It's
You're way more comfortable with like bodily fluids and stuff because you see way more. I think that's fair
okay,
to
but
say.
it's just also the fact that like it's something that women go through every month, and it's like it's not abnormal to everyone who goes through it, but it's abnormal in a film context, in a non-horror context, because we have
Yes, it
chosen
is.
to associate it with scary and uncomfortable. We have
No,
made that
I haven't
decision societally.
right.
Yeah.
The films that it's in depict it as something that is scary, which it is, I think, as a female when that happens, it is
Mm,
scary. I don't think that that's unfair to say that women could feel that way.
yeah,
And
yeah.
that it's not really shown in a regular context of like but Jetta, there's also not a lot of movies that do this. So I think that it's like baby steps here. At least she was masturbating and at least she was feeling pleasure. That's not something that uh, is shown in
But
movies. So
that's
I'm glad that they
mm,
even did something where it's female pleasure oriented. That's not something that we see very often and is generally frowned upon in terms of shock value, or it's just disregarded as being too far.
so. Let me get to the next point. Thank you for that
Go
segue.
for it.
I think it interesting that so when we get to know Bella and she
Hmm.
is beginning to graduate from the child side of her to puberty and to becoming more and more aware of her body,
Uh-huh.
she discovers masturbation, but then it never happens again after she discovers sex with another person. And I find it interesting that that aspect of pleasure is kind of like seen as the precursor. It's like before you get to the big leagues, and then it's never a part of her journey throughout the rest of the movie. Her discovery of sexuality is now only for when she's with other people. And I wonder if that's in the book. I wonder if that's like ever something else that's like part of who she is, or if it's like now you can never do it again.
No,
I want it's just
okay.
something I wonder about, because I feel like that is also true for some people actually in relationships. I feel like there's some people who associate like one thing with relationships and one thing with not being in relationships, and never the twain shall meet. So
Okay, I think that's an interesting point that I wouldn't have considered, and I think that maybe what it is that and I could be wrong here, but I think that what it is that the first thing that people do first is usually that, as opposed to having usually
sure,
you
no,
don't
it's
have sex before you discover that. So
right. No, that's
it's
not
not
the issue. The issue is more like
no,
it
but
never happens
I'm saying
again.
right, but I don't think that they're saying that she never does it again. I think that they're saying that the first
Hmm,
thing that generally happens is that, and then sex is the thing that happens. And I mean, she does things with the woman, her friend at the
sure.
brothel. This is not saying that I do not think that this is saying that one thing is better than the other at all. It's just that there was probably no need to show her doing that alone for the sake of the story. Like there's no narrative value in it other than just saying, "Oh, she does this even though she has had sex with people."
But I will then counter that by pointing out that aside from the flashbacks, which show the former Victoria's death and then the creation of
Uh-huh.
Bella, the
Right.
first shot we get, the first transition into color officially for the movie, is when she's having sex with Duncan. And I find that very interesting because even though like the whole purpose of leaving and going to Lisbon is to find herself and to, get out into the world and discover everything outside those walls of the house she's known, I just
Uh-huh.
find it interesting that the transition into color in her life is not the adventure, it is the sex. And it is the sex specifically with a man. So I just find that really interesting. Like her life was.
But yeah, what do you want from the movie? This is like I don't understand. Like it's like
It's like her life was black and
what do you
white
want
until
it to
that
do?
moment.
No, but how can something encapsulate every other experience? Obviously, it's going to have to hone in on something. I mean,
But
it's not able to say whatever way in which you want to have sex it turns to color. It can only do one version of
I
that, and for
just
Bella, it's with
I
Duncan.
just feel it's interesting that instead of showing her life gaining color just by leaving the house and just by encountering other people, encountering other cultures, traveling, it is the sex specifically that makes the transition. That is what it
What
said.
is your what is your issue with that though?
Well, because I don't feel. See, this is what's interesting because you love Poor Things because you feel like it has a deep personal resonance, and I love that. And for me, when I watch it and I think about my own personal resonance, I don't resonate with that. And so that I think is what I was thinking of. I was thinking, well, that's not something I would relate to. And so just the idea like that is what would make her a woman, that's like what would make her like a part of the world proper now. I don't know.
Yeah,
I had an
I don't
issue with
take it at
that.
all as that it's that make what makes her a
I
woman.
think that that
I
is what it's getting at. That's what I take away from it.
Okay.
Um,
Yeah, I think that the whole entire thing, like from start to finish, is what and this might be a reason why I like Poor Things better than I like Barbie, and that I feel less that Bella is representative of women as just a person, like a human person. Like that's partly maybe why I don't care about the period part
hmm,
because it's trying to encapsulate more than just strictly gender, in my opinion. It's saying like, you learn about your body and then you go out and then you have sex and then you have sex with multiple people, different different people, and then you come back and then you're like, this is who I am. Once you've encapsulated all of
hmm,
that, I do not think that it's as targeted as what you're saying. And I'm glad that it's not, because I do think it'd be alienating in the way that Barbie is if it's solely focused on this is her as a female and this is the female journey. I don't like that.
hmm.
And I
Okay.
mean, unless it's done really, really well. But a lot of things are not done very well when it comes to where I would say, okay,
Hmm.
this really is what it's like to feel this way specifically. So I prefer it to be more inclusive to other people. And nobody could relate to Bella if it had to be, these very, very specific things.
Okay. I will
I
also
don't know.
say I thought something that was also very interesting was the first time that we see Bella engaging with any man technically in terms of like bodily contact is when she's just like tugging at that corpse in Godwin's laboratory and then she starts smashing his brain in, which I
Hmm.
think is indicative of the fact that like throughout the film she's attracted to violence. Like there are all these times when she slaps men, she gets really angry, she kicks, she punches, and then that turns into kissing, wanting sex, like that. Like there's an interesting kind of like sex and violence connection there, more even than sex and death. There's like a violence thing that Bella's really attracted to. So
Or just maybe a primal energy.
yes,
I think that might be like the polite society comment.
right,
Like she doesn't know how to function in polite society, so she's like a child because that's how children act.
sure, sure,
They just are immature. But
sure.
that I don't think that means that she's
But I did find it
psychotic.
well, but I found it interesting that in that moment, we see her just like tugging away at this man. We see her smashing his head in with the knife or scalpel rather. And the first time we see her having sex with Duncan, it feels very much like that moment. He's just lying on the bed like a corpse. And I thought it interesting that maybe she would be taking in this moment. We often think about like sexuality in terms of like things we've grown up with, things we've taken in from childhood onward and impact us.
Uh-huh.
And I just wondered to what extent that was affecting how she understood bodily contact, sexuality, the idea that
Sure.
she would want to be in control in that moment, and he's not doing anything, she's totally in power. So that was like an interesting thing to me. And it also made me think of this movie called Kissed, which is all about a woman who's a necrophile. So, like, there's a lot of interesting ideas that I was thinking of because I was just thinking of a lot of other women directed movies. So, I don't know what my eventual point was there. What was your next question?
Well, you're illustrating what I said earlier about you being completely open to watch things that are very uncomfortable and feeling comfortable with them,
True.
which is not a bad thing, but it does, I think, contribute to your general aesthetic. But
Hmm.
with it, where this is concerned, I'm not sure if that means that you think, like, are you feeling in the rewatch that Bella is too masculine, and that's
Oh,
what,
no.
like she's the one who wants to be in control, she's the one who seems like, I don't know,
Well,
less.
the complicating thing to me is I don't want to make it seem like I've changed my tune entirely on the movie because there's a lot about it I love. I still love the performances, the production design, the music, the everything aesthetic about it. Fantastic. I love the design of it. I think that the way it was put together is so fascinating. I just think that there are certain things about Bella's journey, and I love Bella in terms of her desires. I love her in terms of what she wants. I love her in terms of her
Mm-hmm.
thirst for knowledge. The fact that she will do whatever she wants whenever she wants it because she is so driven. That's like something I respond to very strongly. Um, I just think something that struck me upon watching this was I think that it moves at an incredibly fast pace compared to the first time I saw it. And I feel like a lot of people don't like the pacing of the movie. They think it's too long. They think that segment in Paris goes on too long. I actually think the segment in Paris is my favorite part of the movie. I think that's really fascinating because that's all about her using sex work as a means of figuring out not only what do I think about other men and what do I think about other sexual experiences and how do I gain knowledge from this and what am I learning now as a person growing further and further in the world, but also she's learning all about socialism. She's interacting with people who were even further outside of her worldview than before.
Mm-hmm.
So I love that segment. And I think that it's so interesting that for a lot of people, that's where the movie just kind of stops dead. But I think that's the most thought provoking part of the whole movie. And also very interesting that I feel like she experiences the most pleasure of any sex scene with a woman. Um, to me, I thought. So,
Well, that was one of the complaints of this that I talked about with Kaylin, where the lack of eroticism in the film, or
hmm,
the lack of her falling in love,
which is very,
uh,
yeah, that's very interesting too.
is right.
She never falls
And
in love.
that's less, womanly. Even though, to counter that, this is where I get so annoyed. It is that in Barbie, her acting that way is completely, like, received differently, even though
Hmm,
they're both basically saying the exact same thing. In Poor Things, it's like, oh no, like, why didn't Bella fall in love? Why isn't she romantic like a woman would be? But then in Barbie, she's like, I don't need this relationship. I'm going to be an independent woman.
hmm,
So give me a break. I mean, like, you can't complain about, not you,
hmm,
the general public annoys me when they complain about one thing in a film that is literally the same exact thing
right.
being portrayed. It's just in a different way. One's a comedy. Poor Things is a comedy, but I would say it's a lot more dark than Barbie is.
Yes, but
But
it's still a
still,
comedy.
it shouldn't be that the tone is the end all be all of whether you are willing to take in a certain ideology or a certain standpoint.
Hmm,
And that's what people have really attacked Poor Things for. And that was somehow less female.
hmm, which is
Um,
weird because, like, what does that really mean?
that's what I'm
Yeah.
saying. So that's like, and part of the reason that she doesn't fall in love is because she doesn't meet anybody she likes, and because this isn't really a love story,
Hmm. Yeah.
it's a self-love story.
Right.
Just like you said with Barbie, that, the thing that bothers me about Barbie is the implication that Ken is not Ken-uff unless he he's able to sort of put to rest the idea of falling in love, even temporarily, which I understand that that's like what we all say now, that we all have to be perfect 100% on our own before we can be in a relationship. I think that's
No,
bullshit.
I don't agree with that either.
Yeah, but that's kind of the implication there, because, but it's like saying you should be a really good mechanic before you work on cars. You're going to learn how to be a good mechanic because you work on cars. That these things are related, and there's a more holistic view that I think is being sacrificed on the altar of autonomy.
I mean,
so I'm gonna get off my soapbox.
That's okay. No, for me, the thing with Barbie and Ken is they're just not right for each other. Like that's
I understand
the
what
thing.
you're saying,
Like no matter,
and that makes
no
sense
matter what he does, he'll only be a friend, as he sings about. And so it's not even about like working on himself or changing anything about himself. It just won't happen, and that's okay. He is Knuff. So that's okay. With Poor Things, what's interesting is she does feel a certain kind of love for Max. Like it is, as she calls it, a practical rather than a passionate love. That is more, I think, a respect. That is like a mutual understanding of their intellectual aims, which is still something.
And she certainly has one for Godwin.
Yes, that's a paternal
she experiences
love.
all different types of love.
Yes, of course.
Yeah, like like a family and a friend and a sexual.
Right. So, I mean, that explores all different kinds of affection and respect and appreciation, which doesn't have to be sexual. And sex, of course, can always exist without love. So, I mean, it's all kinds of things. And I do appreciate that about the movie. I like that it explores all these different ways that make Bella human, basically, that make her a part of the world. And I like the fact that at the end, it is ultimately, as I would hope everyone feels when they finish the movie, all about her. It is all about her journey. It is about her brain, her books she's reading, the friends she surrounds her with. And I think it's actually kind of similar in the sense that she could still find someone she loves more than Max. She could develop a deeper love for Max. You don't know what's going to happen in the future, but I like that it's open-ended. I like that you will wait to find out what happens if there's a Poor Things too. I like the idea that she has more ahead of her. She has scientific endeavors. She has medical school learning to do. And so, and that's also kind of interesting comparing to Barbie with the gynecologist, like the body and the brain, like those are ultimately more so than the relationships, more so even than the sex. It is like the person inside that ultimately is the most important thing. And I think that that's very empowering. And I know that you feel like there's an empowerment in that ending too. So, yeah.
Well, and I also think that one thing I like about Bella that I don't feel as strongly in Barbie, you can tell me what you think about this, is that Bella, and I noticed this when I rewatched it yesterday, more so than I did in the past, is very compassionate. She, whenever she's in a situation where it seems like she can't get out of it and that the men are totally in control, you don't really get the sense of worrying about her because you know that she's going to figure it out, but you also feel that she really, really is curious and very open and very willing to see other points of view, and she doesn't want to harm anyone. Okay,
right.
Like even the terrible ex-husband at the end, or her husband, whatever.
Yeah.
She doesn't want to kill him because she's like, I'm not going to let him bleed to death. So she's coming at the world. Obviously, the scene where she sees the suffering children, she's coming at this with a very compassionate stance. Whereas Barbie, I feel, is extremely self-absorbed. She is not. I think that maybe in her own way, she's trying to empathize, but her growth trajectory as compared to Bella's is so shallow, in my opinion, where at the end of Barbie, maybe you feel like now she's going to be able to grow up. But with Bella, I feel like it's so much more rich and full as far as not just maturing, who am I, but also how do I treat other people? What is the right way to live? She even says to Godwin something like, it's hard when you want to kick somebody in the face, but you'd regret it afterwards. She has so much of a deeper arc, whereas Barbie is just like, who am I? Who am I? So narcissistic and obsessive. And I get that that's what the movie's about, but I don't like it as much for that reason.
Okay. I mean, I didn't read it that way. I thought it was pretty much the same trajectory as far as discovery and gaining awareness. I didn't think that there was like a humongous chasm between the two. Just, shown in very different ways, but I feel like Barbie, I just didn't get the sense that she was that self-obsessed. Because I feel like she is
Yeah.
genuinely trying very hard to understand how the world works. Why is Los Angeles so different? Why are people behaving in this different way? I think she's really trying to connect. One of my favorite parts of Barbie is that moment when she's at the bus stop and she realizes that older woman there is beautiful. And that's a
Mm-hmm.
message that you don't get out of Poor Things. Like, you get the message, as cynical as it is, and you don't necessarily have to be like, oh, well, that's exactly what Bella thinks. But something that strikes me as interesting is when Swiney says, you only got so many years left. You're going to get older. You're not going to be wanted by anyone, whether you try or not. You're going to reach that point. And in Barbie, you don't get that same cynicism. You get a sense of like, you can be whatever age you are, you can be at whatever stage of life, look however you look, and you can be beautiful. And Barbie realizes that, and she didn't have to be told that. She just realized it. So I don't think that she's totally narcissistic. I think she's just been so cloistered and she's been so, living in that world where everything is the same every day. She had to get out there and experience it for herself. So,
Right,
yeah.
but I mean, I think Bella was in the same way where she was like sheltered and secluded, but her response to other people is so different because I feel like Barbie is just taking in the information because she's trying to define herself.
Well, but Bella's
Like
trying to
she's
define herself too, I think.
no, but she's genuinely curious about other people, meeting other people, dancing. When she's on the
Hmm.
boat, she's talking about Emerson. She's contemplating the meaning of life. She's literally, the wheels are turning. Barbie is not that way,
Do you think,
in my opinion.
okay, do you think that it's more valid because of the Emerson, because of the reading?
No, I
Hmm.
just think that there is a depth in Poor Things that is lacking in Barbie that is more attractive to
Okay.
me as a person. Like
Well, yeah, of course.
as
This
far
is all
as
like
the movie's
subjectively.
concerned.
Yeah. Okay.
But I think
Hmm.
that it's just I think that what annoys me maybe the most about Barbie is the way that Gerwig infuses cinematic references in a pompous. I know she's
Mm.
probably trying to do an homage to like Monty Python when they walk in and they're like pretending like they're on
Oh,
horses,
yeah, there's a ton
and
of
then like
homage.
the 2001, and
Mm.
then the Matter of Life and Death at the end with Rhea Perlman. There's so much that it's like, okay, I get that she's trying to say that she's a cinephile, but it's also so detracting from the fact that this is kind of empty and this is kind of basic.
Mm.
Like we're talking about like um ideas that aren't rocket science here, and I think that she is doing all this stuff to try to make it seem more profound than it is, whereas with Bella I think that it actually is profound, that it's not just about me figuring out who I am, but it's also who am I in the world, how do I treat others, how do I learn compassion, how am I like a whole human being, as opposed to just like how do I define myself.
Okay.
See what I'm saying? I don't know,
Well,
there's a
no,
lot.
no, I appreciate that that's how you take it in. I still don't think there's a huge difference between the two, I would say. But of course,
Mm-hmm.
you can respond differently to it. That's another thing. I don't think there's
Well, and the
like,
writing is very different
yeah,
because we've got the guy who did what's his name, Mac McNamara. I want to say
yes,
the writer who does the grade, and
sure.
I mean, there's also just kind of like a Shakespearean um, elevation that kind of contributes to that feeling a little bit more
Elevated.
grown up.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I get that.
yeah.
I mean, I think one of the most interesting things about the Barbie experience is that it was such a colossal blockbuster experience. The fact that it made so much money, that one of the biggest reasons why people hate on it is because it was so successful and it's almost like resented for its success. Like outside of
Mm-hmm.
like what it even says or anything else about the production, just like the fact that it was such a big deal is part of what bothers people. Because like if it was a movie that didn't make any money, would people be as aggressive in, criticizing every element of it? Maybe not.
Well,
I think that's an
and I
interesting
think that
aspect of
people
it.
enjoy that though. Like
Yes.
they enjoy the controversy
Right.
of like, you know, what is this saying about this, and I'm going to get mad because I disagree.
Yeah,
It was also to turn into a political thing too.
sure. And it is somehow even more frustrating to people who don't like it that it's now like one of the biggest movies in the history of movies. Like that makes it so much more exaggerated in whatever you think it's doing wrong. It's doing the most wrong it could possibly do. So, yeah, I don't know. I think
This is
yes.
this is kind of like Hitman though, where it's like
Mm.
I mean,
Which I
there's a
need to
certain
see.
no, I don't mean the Barbie is like Hitman. I mean that like if the thing is a success,
Hmm.
I'm not resentful just because I wasn't crazy about it. I think that that's kind of an immature
But it is a way a lot of people
response.
responded, I
I
think. Yeah.
understand, but I think that that has more to do with people just wanting to argue and
Yeah.
fight and engage and just I don't know. To your point, like people wanting to connect, even negatively, and if something is just widely regarded as good, there's no conflict there. There's no stimulation.
Right. Right. I think that the fact that it was so incredibly successful just I mean, you could argue the same thing for Oppenheimer. That was also incredibly successful, and I also had reasons to take it to task, and I'm sure a lot of that also had to do with the fact that it was such a big deal. And if it hadn't been,
Oh, okay.
I might have not really cared as much about like digging in.
Okay.
But because it was this big cultural event, I felt like I really had to, take it to task and make sure that like everyone understood everything I was feeling. So that's like an aspect outside of the movie itself, but I think it's also an interesting part of it. Because it's impossible to
Yeah,
watch
it's kind
Barbie and not think, wow, this is the biggest selling movie ever made by a woman director. Like that, that does have some kind of an impact on the experience, thinking about the gargantuan success. Hmm.
well, and it kind of also is, I think, like Hitman. It's emblematic of the fact of where we are.
Hmm.
Like we are a bit starved for certain things, I think,
Sure.
in movies, and if we even get a taste of them, we kind of go nuts because I think that we are malnourished.
Hmm.
Like we're malnourished with erotic thrillers,
Sure.
and like nudity in movies,
Right.
and like, but I don't mean just like gratuitous. I just mean like even anything meaningful depicted in that way. We're just so far into the puritanical side of, and so used to superheroes and so used to things being a certain way,
Hmm.
but then at the same time, um we know what people are doing on their own, so
Right.
it's very confusing in that
Yeah,
sense.
like one of the weirdest things to me about criticisms of Poor Things is the idea that any of the sex is gratuitous.
Right.
Not really. I mean, like, is there anything in it that has never been done in a movie before? No.
No,
So,
it's just that there's so much for the modern,
right. And
you
that's
know
like the wackiest thing to me that we go through these, waves, these shifts in what is permissible and what is suddenly like scandalous again. Like,
I know what you
yeah, like
mean.
we're a country that was watching porn in movie theaters in the 70s. Like this is like not like a brand new thing to us, and yet we go through these moments of suddenly becoming extremely conservative in our viewing again, and all of a sudden things are shocking again, and it's like, oh my god, what about the children? So the idea that anything in Poor Things would be a revelation is just fascinating because it's not.
It
So
might also have to do with like actors as well, because I think that that's something, that actors and actresses just aren't as down like people were in the 80s, to
right.
just be out there, because there's so much more exchanges going on between us, like the audience, like social media, and there's so much harsh judgment, and I don't know, I feel like it's
Hmm.
such a different time to be doing that, whereas like Sharon Stone in Basic Instinct, like she didn't have a problem, it's
Well,
not
she
the
did have a
same as
problem
far as
if you
reception.
read.
Well, she did have a
Yeah.
problem, but you know what I mean, as far as like being willing to do it in the first place. I think that it's harder for us to find people now who are even willing at
Well,
all.
I think it's the interesting conversation that happens now is the idea that, well, just that there is a conversation because now, like, it's a question of intimacy coordinators and what is comfortable and actually taking the actor's point of
Uh-huh.
view. And obviously, the fact that Emma Stone produced the film means she had a degree of control over what she was doing. So,
And was willing to do it. I
right.
mean, totally,
That
yeah,
is that's an
supported the
interesting
vision.
conversation now that I don't think existed to the same degree decades ago. So,
It's kind of like Challengers.
hmm,
Zendaya being down for that, and Euphoria, and being producer, and like, I mean, there's just only certain women that will
right.
go all in like that, and um feel like the story is made better because of that depth and because of that component. It's a little bit more rare to see, I
Hmm.
think, just generally speaking, but it has nothing to do with the audience because everybody loved Challengers. So
Not
I don't know
everyone
who
loved
they think they're
Challengers.
not making these movies for.
I feel like there were people who didn't like it. Weren't there?
A lot of people liked it.
But isn't it also
I
true,
know.
and you'll have to tell me because I haven't seen it yet, that it's not really all that gratuitous? There's not that much sex in it. It's more like the buildup. It's more the sense of growing eroticism, right?
Yes, but even that we don't really see.
Yeah.
Like the sensuality aspect and just making it charged like Luca can do.
Hmm.
You know, he's kind of unusual in this way. I feel like he has a gift for this. Um but yeah, that even just
We're settling for breadcrumbs,
foreplay.
basically. Like, that's kind of,
That's what I'm
yeah.
saying. Yeah, for Hitman to be said that it's steamy and erotic and all this stuff when it's like, give me a
Hmm.
break. I mean, I'm sorry. That is not, we're not body heat level, even though it was trying to be. So,
Right.
but anyway, okay, Jetta, final thoughts. Is there anything that you want to say before we end?
One other thing I will suggest. Okay, two things. I'll start with the
Go
negative, but
ahead.
then end with a positive. You'll appreciate that.
Okay.
Um,
Okay.
I think it's really interesting that the two characters, like major characters who are people of color, are both the people who bring her like a ton of wisdom she didn't have. And it gets into a little bit of a tropey territory for me. Like Harry. He's like a notable man who doesn't have any attraction to her. And I don't know if we're supposed to wonder if he's gay because Gerard Carmichael is gay. I don't know.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, so like I don't know if that's actually like part of like why he was cast or like what we're supposed to perceive or anything because that would like require the outside knowledge of that. But I do think it's interesting that like he is a person who brings her knowledge of like the poor suffering in the world. And there's no discussion of the fact also that he's like a black American man. Like so he has some maybe
Yeah.
some
I don't like his character in any way at all.
yeah, it's interesting though that she just calls him a cynic, but it's like, well, he might have some reason to be cynical. Like he may have some like personal identification with like suffering and pain that she doesn't know. So that was something interesting I thought about, but also like her friend at the brothel. Like it's just interesting that like it's not the
Uh-huh.
white characters who bring her the most outside knowledge of like pain and suffering, but also political understanding and how to better yourself and that's just very interesting to me because I don't think it gets into like uncomfortable territory because I also really like the actors, but I just think like that's a little bit of like a bringing in wisdom from like the people of color for the white characters to grow. I don't know how I feel about
Doesn't
that.
that mean that they're better than us, though?
Yeah,
I
but it's
don't
such
feel
a
like that's.
it is such a
I mean,
trope,
that means that that's like implying that white people don't give wisdom and advice.
but
Why
it
would
is such a
that be
cinematic
an insult
trope
to them?
that
Okay.
I'm
I
thinking
don't
about
know.
it.
I feel like that's a compliment more so than, I mean, that's more of a slam against white
No,
people.
it's not that it's not. It's just it's such a cinematic trope. I don't I don't know
Okay.
how it just feels a little uncomfortable to me. That's all I'm saying. But the other
Okay, I
thing,
understand.
the other thing that I will say, I find it very entertaining that I watched Sanctuary yesterday because I
That's right. You wanted to say
right
that.
I
Yeah.
remembered the fact that Margaret Qualley, who I really like in Poor Things, even though she's not in it very much, but she's very funny. I just thought it was interesting that she made that with Christopher Abbott before Poor Things. So
Who's also in Poor
right, I
Things.
wanted to, and I
Yeah.
think he's also great in Poor Things. His character is just so incredibly hateable. He's incredible.
He's great because he's just
Oh
awful.
my god,
He's like, I'm going to point a gun at your head and shoot
he's
you.
so incredibly evil. I thought it was so interesting that he is a submissive in Sanctuary and then the ultimate sadist in Poor Things, The Range. So
Just got to give a
yes,
shout out. Lau is our friend. Lau is in
right.
love with this guy, or I think he said he had a man crush.
He is
so.
such a good
I know
actor. He is like
he is a good
he is
actor.
totally believable in both parts. So just wanted to give him a shout out.
I've got to see that movie.
Yeah.
Well, Jetta, this has been very good.
Mm-hmm.
I would have never stuck to my guns like I did if I hadn't done this series. And I really appreciate you being willing to do this with me and that we love each other and that we're friends and that like I can be strong in what I think now, because
Mm-hmm.
as this has gone on, I really have been able to articulate myself in such a better, clearer way. And I appreciate that you have such a spirit of like, well, okay,
Well, I'm
that's
concerned now that people are going to be like, "Oh my God, she doesn't know why she likes Barbie."
oh no, I know
I couldn't
why.
express
I know
it, but
why.
I feel it, and
No,
the feeling counts.
yeah, and for you, that's I think that that's big,
Yeah,
and you're a big emotion
I
person,
think so.
so I think that it was. Don't worry.
Okay.
But I appreciate this space, and I hope that someone will definitely, everyone should be able to identify with both of our views. And I hope that you enjoyed, and thank you for doing this with me, Jet, from start to
Of
finish.
course, anytime.
All right, we'll see you at the movies.